it is my privilege to introduce our 2016 William D. Reynolds Award winner, Karen Gunter.
Thank you very much. I thank the Alumni Association for choosing this award for me. But you know, no one does this sort of thing by themselves. And it would be wrong for me not to introduce you to the people who really, really made a difference. First is Sandra Madison, the person who wrote that fantastic thing. Boy, you made up a lot of stuff, Sandra. You know, Sandra and I met about 20 years ago when I went to Chicago for a year and stayed 20. And we worked very closely together, taking care of children with special needs in the home. The best place for a child to get well is in the home. And so we did everything we could to make sure that happened if the parent wanted it. So Sandra has really been on this path with me, and I consider it a path. You just somehow hear a voice, whatever you want to call it, and you say yes, and you have no idea what you're saying yes to at the time, but sure, I'll do that. This has been a 20-year path to be on, and sometimes it's kind of scary, you know. Neither of us are wealthy people, and how on earth are we going to accomplish what we're being asked to do? But I wrote an email to one of my counterparts in Africa, and I said, boy, I'm really afraid we're never going to be able to get that school bus because of how much it costs. And I got back this beautiful email. Karen, don't worry. God's walking in front of you. And I have never, ever forgotten that. I'd heard it many times, you know, but that somehow touched the heart. So I'm a big fan of women's basketball here at Notre Dame. And when I look at the team, I see that there is a coach, and the coach is making the decision who goes out on the court for whatever reason. We may need height, we may need speed, or whatever it is. I'm not the coach of this group. I might be the point guard, but the coach is the guy upstairs. And he chooses who comes on that path, and it's been unbelievable. When Sandra and I made our first trip to Africa, we were in LaGuardia, and Sandra said to me, Karen, look at those guys with those rifles. And I looked up and I said, well, Sandra, that's Nelson Mandela. And I reached down to get my camera real quick. At the same time Sandra reached down to pick up the ticket she dropped, we were both laid out flat in LaGuardia. Never did get a picture of Nelson Mandela. But my fears of flying on South African Airlines was completely over. My vision of that was Piper Cub or something that we're going to go to Africa on the first time. After we'd been in Africa for about 48 hours, there was a physical therapist who knew how interested we were in children. She said, would you like to see where some mothers are taking care of their children with cerebral palsy? And we said, oh yeah. So when everybody else went out on the tour, we went and saw this wonderful place where illiterate mothers were teaching their children how to speak, how to eat. They knew how to manipulate their muscles so they would eventually learn how to walk. Then the physical therapist said, would you like to see another one? And we said yes. Well, this was quite different. She took us out into a squatter village with one leaky faucet and no electricity, and people living in houses that were made with whatever they could find. Because at that time, apartheid had ended and they were coming into the city, but there was no place to be. On that property, there was an old block church that was literally falling down. When we went in, you could look up and you could see through the ceiling of it, but on the floor were 5 children with cerebral palsy and 3 mothers learning how to take care of their children. Now, in Africa at that time, they didn't go to a bank and get a 30-year loan and build a new building. They bought one block at a time. And outside this old church was a little pile of bricks. And they were determined that they would eventually have another building for their children. Well, Sandra and I made the decision, probably each of us individually, that we talked about it within minutes of leaving there, that we would build them a center so that their children would be able to learn how to walk. These children had never, ever stood. And we then asked the people that we were on the trip with to come and see this. And the next day we took them there, and then we took up our first collection. Now, I'll tell you that my least favorite thing to do in the whole world is to ask other people for money. Unfortunately, Sandra and I were working, and we could contribute most of the cost of building that new building. And that was the beginning. And that building was finished in about 3 years, and the children are now walking, eating, growing. It's up to 35 or 40 children. Another school came in and built because the center was there, and the story goes on and on and on. The mothers who couldn't read or write wrote a constitution because the government of South Africa had said, if you ever get a building, we will give you a license, and with the license, it will be funded. When we finished there, it was completely self-sufficient and over with as far as we were concerned, although I will tell you they still do keep in touch with us. The other thing I want to tell you about is the other people on this journey. As I told you, Sandra has been every step of the way, but there are other people who've been on this journey, and they're here tonight. We have Julie Scalise, Kay Gonzowski, Eileen Donovan, and what's your name? Nancy Irwin. These people were the next people that were put on the path for me. And they all said, we want to help. We want to help. What can we do? And I said, okay. And I'll never forget their face when I said, we have to raise $40,000 pretty quick because there's a school we need to build. $40,000? I said, well, yeah, you said you wanted to help. And they've never, ever stopped. They have helped every bit of the way. And I don't think any of us are comfortable with the money issue, but we pass the hat every place we go, there's for sure. And now Sandra is known as Doe and I'm Nate when we walk in anybody's house. These ladies, this past 24 months, have provided 320,000 meals to the children. We've paid salaries for 10 teachers, built a dining hall to get the kids off of the dirt where they were eating, built a kitchen, put 2 more stories on that building for classrooms. We started with 50 children in a stable, and now we have 300 children going from nursery school through the 7th grade. The children all speak English. English, when you walk through the school zone now, it says English zone, and that will give them a leg up for the rest of their lives. They purchased the books and desks, put in a playground, drilled a well that provides safe water for the school and the entire village, as a matter of fact, and that took 3 countries to accomplish. It took the Americans, the Tanzanians, and the South Koreans. And when they were halfway finished, I was asking for the bill so that we could pay them, and I got an email that said, your bill is paid in full. And it's amazing. It happens every day. In addition to that, we have worked with the Canossa sisters in Arusha, Tanzania, to connect up the health care of the children with Canossa. So every child gets a complete physical every year. Now you're going to be the first to hear this story. When the children were in the 1st grade and were tested, they're all tested for HIV. 3 of the children were positive, and those children were treated from the moment we found out they were positive to this day. And they also received special nutrition. Same children were tested, about 2 months ago? One of those children is no longer positive. It's amazing. And we've started a research project, just unofficially, to see if we can see any difference in the care those children had. They're all orphan children, and so it's very difficult to get some history there. But we're hoping to connect up with someone else who's doing greater research on this subject, because to have a child revert back to negative is amazing. The dispensary could do minor things, but now we're in the process of converting it to a small hospital. And we have delivered 4 babies, 1 preemie, and they're all doing super. So I thank you again for this award. I'm very proud of it. When I've traveled through Africa, there are 2 names that can come up, and everyone knows them. One is, help me, Sandra, in Chicago. Oprah Winfrey. Everybody knows Oprah Winfrey in Africa. But they also all know Notre Dame University. That's true.